And we are live.
Hey there, welcome once again to the IncrediChat. Tonight, me and Michael Grazia have our very special guest star, and also he was going to be one of our featured guests this past weekend at IncrediCon, Tim Clarke. He's a toy sculptor, puppet sculptor, worked on Dark Crystal, Fraggle Rock, as well as toys, as you know from your childhood, like Sectaurs.
Yep.
Of course, Boglins, all of which, like Boglins especially, you can get from his website, which we'll talk a little bit more as well as we go forward tonight. We'll be taking some questions as we go. So, welcome, Tim. Hello, Grazia.
Hello.
Started.
Yes. We got one viewer already. So just don't forget, guys, comment, ask your questions. Tim Clarke is here with us. So let's begin. So, Tim, for those who don't know you, just give us a little background on who you are.
Hold on just a second.
You got it.
A warning here that my battery is not, my phone is not charging. I don't know why.
Uh-oh.
We got more people coming in now, too, so that's
anyway, hopefully it won't turn off. I started out, I took a course with Kermit Love, who designed and built Snuffleupagus and Big Bird when I was at Pratt Institute. And, towards the end of the class, he asked me what I was going to be doing once I graduated. And I said, well, I'm in art ed and I'm looking for a teaching job, but there aren't any. And he said to me, well, why don't you come and work with me? So I said right away, of course, yes, definitely. And I think the first job I had working with Kermit was each season they would have to build a new Big Bird and Snuffy. And I was given the job of dyeing Snuffleupagus for this kind of orange-brown color. And then after you dyed the fur and we cut it and constructed him, you had to take ostrich feathers and strip them down and glue them into the fur one at a time. That's what makes his fur look alive on the television screen, is the movement of the feathers.
Okay. Because that's what I was gonna say, for Snuffy and a lot of the Muppet characters, it is like a very feathery kind of material, right?
It's almost, a lot of them have feathers, ostrich feathers, glued into the fur fabric because they're so light that any air or movement, makes them, it makes the puppet look more alive. It's, it was a very important feature of many of the puppets. I mean, that's what makes Animal look so crazy.
Gotcha.
So, what else? So then after that, we, feathering Big Bird was, the grunt work of every person who started working at Muppet. And I did that. I can't remember. I think it took probably about 3 weeks to feather all of Big Bird's body.
Wow.
And then we also, Kermit had the contract for doing all the overseas Sesame Street characters. So we did puppets for Germany and Sesame Street in Mexico, and also for Sesame Street in Kuwait. And CTW has expanded on that, a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that the Sesame Street now is seen like in just an incredible amount of countries around the world, and they gear characters for each country. So you're not always seeing the same Sesame Street characters that you see in the U.S.
Okay.
So, and then Kermit also did a lot of design for ballet companies, for Joffrey and for New York City Ballet. So we built a 20-foot high marionette for Don Quixote, which
Wow.
was basically the set piece of the windmill went out up into the rafters, and the giant was plywood flats that were cantilevered back and forth like an accordion in the floor. So you didn't see it from the audience that it was flat on the floor, and then it was marionetted through up into the rafters, and it just sprung up from the floor and started swinging this mace across the stage. And I think it was the only time I ever saw a set piece get a round of applause in a ballet. You know, that this thing sprung up from nowhere, started swinging this mace across the stage. Everybody just started clapping. And I was like really surprised. And it was, I have to say, it was an incredible thing to watch the rehearsals for New York City Ballet, because at that time Balanchine had a woman, and Kermit told me that woman sitting next to him has memorized every single ballet that Balanchine has ever done. She knows every movement for every dancer now you talk about having a visual memory. And if he makes a change, she remembers the change. That's how important she is. I wish I could remember her name, but I'll never forget him telling me that. And they would just sit side by side, and you know, he would make changes or corrections as the ballet went along, depending on who the dancer was. And she would remember that and and train the dancers during dress rehearsals and while they were practicing. So it was a really incredible thing to watch.
So I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned Kermit Love. So just curious, because I didn't know that part of your history. You worked with Kermit. Did you have anything? Did you work with Great Space Coaster as well? Because I know he designed some of those characters.
No. I was after I worked for Kermit for a year. His work was kind of irregular, so I asked him. I was going to go and ask him if I could get an interview with Jim.
Okay.
And I went to see him at Pratt because he was teaching, and I was living out on Long Island at the time, and I was waiting for him outside the classroom door, and the class ended and the kids were leaving. And I stepped into the doorway, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." And I said, "Why?" He said, Jim has started up this new project at Muppets that I think you would be great to work on. And I've set up an interview with him.
Oh, wow.
For next Thursday. And I was like, God, it's like Kermit's reading my mind now. I was totally shocked. I was like, okay, great, So I went out home and I packed up all my puppets that I had been making while I was at Pratt, and actually one of them was the one that influenced Sectaurs, which is this fly hand puppet.
Yeah, I'm gonna just give you the screen so everyone can see it better.
Let me get it on. There you go. There he is. So this was the original Sectaur, and I showed this to Jim when I interviewed with him. And he said, "Oh, I really like what you're doing, that you're not just making a puppet that goes like this with its mouth, that you're thinking about using your hand in a different way." And I had also done a crab, which I don't have anymore, which was all my 4 fingers, and on my thumbs were the eyeballs. And then I had put extensions on my fingers and made a hard shell that went across the back. So I was using both hands to make the crab scurry across, the tabletop. So those were 2. There were others. I had done a dragon that went across my, from hand to hand across my back. I mean, across the top of my head. And I had done another puppet that I called Mephistopheles, which was all cut from of scales made out of like 1/8-inch thin foam that I had dyed and then with magic marker made detail in it. So unfortunately, I don't have those puppets anymore because they got destroyed in a flood.
Oh.
In my parents' house, they were in storage in the basement, and they all got wrecked. But the main thing was that Jim said, that he said what we're going to be doing is not the usual Muppet characters. We're doing something totally new and different. And then, like after seeing all the work, he said, okay, so when can you start? And I said, I'll start tomorrow. And he said, no, I have to talk to HR, and then why don't you come in on Tuesday? So, and that project was Dark Crystal.
Wow. So can I just ask, I mean, like, so this is probably around what, like 79, 80 roughly?
That was the fall of 78.
So, I mean, what was it like? I mean, I'm sure people would like to know this too. What was it like? This was like right at the heyday. The Muppet Show was rocking. Sesame Street was rocking. The Muppets were becoming the household name that they became. What was that like? What was it?
Muppet was already well known by then.
Yeah. So what was
the Muppet Show was already, full on in the works and doing really, really well.
Yeah. So what was it like walking in and meeting this like huge star, Jim Henson? What was he like?
It was very intimidating, but it's like, it was funny because it's like I had all my stuff in garbage bags because I didn't have boxes to put them in, and I just kept pulling these things. And we were in the middle of the workshop, so the people who already were working at Muppets, and most of them were doing work on probably Sesame Street characters for New York, or were working on characters for Muppet Show itself. So, yeah, it was very intimidating. But when I saw the way he was reacting to what I was showing to him, I became a lot more relaxed. Mm-hmm. And Jim was a very kind of quiet and soft-spoken person. He wasn't, he wasn't very gregarious or, showy or full of himself at all. He was very relaxed and easygoing and very easy to talk to. It's like, if anything, Jim was on the shy side. Like when we moved the workshop to London, mm-hmm. and a bunch of us went over from the New York shop to London. A lot of times Jim would come in and he would talk to us in a puppet voice, as if he wasn't really comfortable talking to us, as himself. And he would walk in and go, "Well, hello, Ben. What are you doing? And what are you working on today? What have you been up to?" And then, we used to say that Jim had a whim of iron because, like I remember one time I was sculpting one of the Mystic heads, and he came over and he said to me, "Tim, what if you tried doing this and this and this?" And he was just making like observations and changes. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Okay, fine." So then I spent the whole week resculpting that particular Mystic head, mm-hmm. Moving more towards the direction that I thought Jim wanted. And he would come in once a week, because at that time he was working on Muppet Show. So he was very busy. And he walked in and he came over to me and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, Jim, when you were here last time, you said, why don't you try doing this and this and this, and make these changes?" And he said, "Yeah, but I didn't mean for you to do it. I just meant for you to think about it." And I was like going, like, I almost like said to him, like, "Jim, do you not know who you are?" You can't come in and tell me to change something and you think I'm going to ignore it. It's like, and everybody, I wasn't the only one that experienced this. Almost all of the puppet designers, said the same thing, that, he would make suggestions and you thought, okay, I better do this, and then he would come back, like 3 days later and say, "Oh, what did you do? Why did you do that?" It was very funny.
Because I've heard stories too that at times he was known to sometimes, like late at night after everybody's gone home, go in and tinker around with different things too, and just play around with what people were doing. And I guess
no, I don't remember. Jim worked every day of the week. 12, 14 hours a day, and it's like when I think about it, his schedule was unbelievable. I mean, when you think he was working on Muppet Show, working on Dark Crystal, and working on Sesame Street, and flying the Concorde back and forth between London and New York to oversee production on these all three of these things, and then Muppet Show finished, and Sir Lou Grade had put up the money to produce Dark Crystal, and he said to Jim, before you go into shooting Dark Crystal, I want you to do a Muppet movie first, because I want the money from the next Muppet movie to help fund the production of Dark Crystal. So in the middle of working on Dark Crystal, we all got put on working on Great Muppet Caper.
Oh, wow.
And so I can't, it's like, I know we spent a few months, the New York shop was working on the puppets for that. Miss Piggy was, had to be done in foam latex.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that work she had been resculpted because Frank was not happy with the first foam latex head.
Mm-hmm.
He preferred the original hand-carved foam head. But those water scenes where Miss Piggy is swimming in Great Muppet Caper, I don't even remember how many piggies they had to go through just to do that one scene, because the foam would absorb the water, even though they tried to seal it, and especially right here under her neck, it kept splitting open.
Oh, wow.
So they would just take that puppet off, put on another one. It's like, and it was a phenomenal amount of work. Even Dark Crystal, I mean, we spent 2.5 years, working on that movie before, it started filming. It just unheard of. But Jim was very lucky in that he was getting money from the licensing for Sesame Street. He was getting money from the licensing of Muppet Show, and then for the Muppet movies, so he had the income to fund it, to fund us working, this incredible amount of time on these projects.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it at the time that this was unheard of in the movie industry. I mean, because I never worked for, any other movie production. Well, I did work on the Sectaurs movie production, but that only lasted 6 weeks, and then Coleco pulled the plug.
Oh, I didn't know there was going to be a Sectaurs movie.
Yeah, we were out in California, and it was going to be stop motion animation with live actors on really enormous insects. And yeah, unfortunately, Coleco did Atom Computers and lost all their money doing that. So
ColecoVision, right?
no, it wasn't ColecoVision. ColecoVision, I think, did reasonably all right. It was Atom Computer that sunk them. Just and that's why Sectaurs never went into its second year.
Gotcha. While we're just having this conversation here, with all great stuff. Let's just say hey to everybody that's in there: Anthony Just, Mike Reese, Terry Angus is watching us, Joe Ryan, who's always with us. He's here tonight. I'm going to try this name. Zainab. He says, "Nice hat, Tim." So he's digging the hat. Anthony's digging the hat too. So it's a cool hat. I was like, hey, that's cool. So we have some people watching about who are fans of toys, fans of Dark Crystal. So guys, certainly ask your questions as we continue the conversation tonight with Tim Clarke. We'll answer whatever questions that you have. But yeah, I think going from the Sectaurs. So let me ask, Sector. So you went from Dark Crystal over to Sectaurs. What was the transition like from Henson to?
Well, no, actually, after Dark Crystal finished shooting in July of '82, my wife and I finally went on our honeymoon because we couldn't do it during the film production because I was working 7 days a week. And when I got back to England after our honeymoon, I walked into the workshop and they said, you need to pack up your stuff because you're going back to New York to work on Fraggle Rock.
Oh, that's right. Wow.
So that's what we did. We packed up all our stuff in our apartment and headed back to New York and found a place to live, and then went back to the New York Muppet shop, which was all brand new. It was the new office in the mansion on 69th Street.
The townhouse, right?
Yeah, and we were in the basement of that building, and the first thing I had to build was Uncle Traveling Mat. Okay. And then after that, Jane Gutnick and I built all the radio-controlled singing Fraggles that you see in the background, which were a bear, to put it mildly, because the radio-controlled mechanisms were very sensitive to weight. So we had to use a very lightweight fleece, and hiding the seams in that was twice as hard as the regular fleece, Antron fleece that Muppets use. And if we put the eyes too far forward on the puppet's head, the mouth would not open because of the added weight of the two eyes or their eyebrows. And if we put it too far back on the pivot, then the mouth would just open and just chatter. It would not function properly. So they had to be exactly balanced over the pivot point so that the radio control mechanism would work. And I think Jane and I built 60 of those puppets.
Oh, wow.
And then they got up to Canada because Fraggle Rock was shot in Canada. And, like the really big creatures had radio controls. A lot of the doozers all had radio controls. And so they all had to be on different frequencies. And unfortunately, the radio controlled Fraggles that we had built with Foz were too close to the frequency that the fire station 2 blocks away from the studio was using. And every time a fire truck went by, the Fraggles would just start, like doing all these erratic movements, and it drove Jim crazy. He said, forget it. He said, just She said, get rid of them, get puppeteers in here, just make regular hand puppets. And they ended up filling the back scenes with, a lot of extra puppeteers they hired in Canada.
Well, as we're talking about Canadian puppeteers, just wanted to also say the name that I did not do well with. That is Zay, and she says hello, Tim. Zay. And then speaking of Canadian puppeteers, Terry Angus is joining us, and he was one of the puppeteers that worked, I guess, some of those background characters on Fraggle Rock as well. Hey,
yeah. And I never worked in Canada. I was in the New York shop, and there was only. Because of the union rules in Canada, only just like in England, there was a very small crew of us from New York who went over to the UK because the union rules in both England and Canada are very strict. So, so a lot of the stuff was built in the New York shop and then just shipped up there, and then they hired local people. I'm pretty sure Raleigh Cruson went up to Canada, and Tim Miller and a few others, but I did not. I think shortly after that they kind of realized that they had way too much staff in the New York workshop, and they said, we're going to put you on a freelance basis and we'll bring you in for different projects. And that's when I started doing more toy design and development work. Like I sculpted the Dark Crystal figures for Hasbro.
Okay.
I did a Cookie Monster clock for Ideal.
Yeah.
And I did also an Ernie and Bert characters for Knickerbocker, which then was bought out by Applause, and all kinds of stuff from all kinds of different toys and toy properties and licensing.
So now, before we get into the toys, as we're wrapping up your career with the Muppets and the Henson company, so Joe Ryan asks, and I mean, I kind of know the story of this, and you talked a little bit about it with Jim and the sculpting for Dark Crystal. Joe wants to know, were the puppet designs based off of original sketches of the characters before they were created? So obviously with Dark Crystal, you had the Frouds artwork, and then Fraggle was Michael Frith. So what was that process like before you started building the puppets?
No, Michael drew sketches of almost all the main characters. All the background characters, they were just for us to make up. I mean, Jane and I would just play around with, like whatever we wanted them to look like.
Yeah.
You had a basic idea of what a Fraggle looked like, and then you worked off that. So, but Michael certainly did the drawings for all the major characters that you see. And then, it's like Michael always used to say to us, he said, it's like what you guys do, like what I do in these simple little pencil sketches and what you turn it into is always amazing to me and remarkable, because, it's not always easy to take something that's two-dimensional and make it believable as a three-dimensional object.
Yeah.
And a lot of times now, I don't even bother sketching. I just sculpt or build a puppet dimensionally, and then if like I'm still doing stuff for TV commercials. If the client wants changes to it, I said, look, I will say to them, it's easier for me to actually make the puppet and then have you tell me what you want to be different than to do like 1,000 different drawings of what you think the puppet is going to look like, because it can be dramatically different. Plus also, a puppet has to move and it has to work. And a two-dimensional drawing is not always something that can be realized as a moving three-dimensional object.
Okay.
I was looking for some artwork. Like obviously, here's some of the Froud's work for Dark Crystal.
Oh, Froud stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, even Brian's stuff. There was, and I have to say, Brian gave us a lot of latitude in what we did. So, like he would always draw the left-hand side of the Mystic's faces, and then he just said to me, "Tim, just do the right side." He said, "I'm not going to do the right side drawings for you. Just you make it up how you see fit." So all of the left side of the Mystic's faces are Brian's, and all the right sides are designed, with the scroll patterns and all that I would make up. And one of the funny things I remember being on the Underground with my wife in England, and there was a little woman sitting across from me, and I'm just like looking at all the wrinkles in her face and the details and how the lines, broke away from her eyes and stuff. And my wife, jabs me in the ribs, and she says, "What are you doing?" And she just has such incredible wrinkles. And she said, "It's bad enough having a husband who looks at other women, but who looks at old women. Like, what's wrong with you?" Said, "Come on, she's got great wrinkles. Look at them." Because that's all I was doing all day was figuring out how to make ornate and different wrinkles, because each mystic had to have its own personality, and that personality was based on the spirals and or the Celtic kind of knots that were put into their faces. And Brian didn't want them to be, because they were supposed to be ancient creatures, he didn't want the kind of the Celtic knots to be really obvious. He wanted them to be, aged into the character. So, it was an incredible challenge to make each one different and to find a common theme to them, but at the same time giving them individual personalities.
So, just a couple of comments here. Okay, well, Zay just wrote the spirals are all very unique and distinctive. And back, Joe Ryan thanks you for your amazing insight as a creator. He's always interested in how the finished work is created, and it's inspiring. Scott Ferguson is Dark Crystal is not his favorite movie; it is his obsessed movie, which is cool. Terry Angus is giving shout outs for Early Crenson and Tim Miller. And Zay is saying that they should make more Fraggles. Zay, and I guess we can maybe talk about this later as we talk about the future things. But we're on the Dark Crystal kick right now. The new Dark Crystal, were you approached about being a part of that? Would you like to work on that?
No.
The new
the only people they asked back were Brian and Wendy, which I'm kind of surprised, because Raleigh, who is still working in the New York shop, built all the Fizz gigs. And I was surprised they didn't ask her to make the new ones, but I don't know why and Brian said to me when I saw him in London in February, he said, "I asked them to get in touch with you guys, because," he said, "why are we hiring all these new people who know nothing about building puppets when we have people that have done this and are still around, And I don't know, it's like, who the heck knows why, it's like, it's not.
Yeah. Anthony,
I'm just glad that I got to do the first one, and that it's had such an incredible influence on people. I mean, the great conjunction that they did in London in February, I mean, it was overwhelming. The turnout was unreal, and the room was literally packed, because we were all in one large room, which used to be the cafeteria at Elstree Studios.
Oh, really?
It's pretty funny. I didn't realize it till towards the end because it has changed so much. And they somebody pointed out to me and said, "Yeah, this." I think it was David Barkley, who said to me, "Yeah, Tim, that's where the cafeteria used to be." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
That's funny.
It was funny.
Anthony just wants to know: is there a link in the design for the Mystics and the Skeksis?
Yes and no, but it's not totally straightforward. I mean, it was up to Brian to establish that, and I don't think he had like hard, strict rules of head shape that would be repeated from one to the other. There was an association, but it wasn't like really hard set.
Yeah, because he had a follow up to that. He said when designing one Mystic was the corresponding evil puppet.
I'm sorry, Mike, you're breaking up a lot, so it's hard for me to hear you.
Mike, I'll put it up on the screen here so you can read it. But yeah.
There you go. Oh, we should be doing this. Why are we not doing this?
Well, it's not every time that I could do it.
Gotcha.
For quickness, we go so fast talking. But anyway, it says when designing one Mystic, say, was there a corresponding evil puppet influenced in its final creation / look? Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if you froze.
I just talked. No, there wasn't. There was a correlation, but it wasn't really exact or, fine. I think some of those associations between the matching characters were made after they were built and not during the process. Okay. But Brian would know that better than I was because, I mean, at first we were all in the same workshop, but then as we got closer to production, we moved out to Elstree Studios, and the Skeksis were being built way off in one studio. The Mystics were all in another studio. The Gartham were in a totally separate studio. And at the same time, Empire Strikes Back was being shot there, and Yoda was being built. So, I could walk around and see what, the sets that were being built for that, and see the sets that were being built for Dark Crystal. And I have to say, one of the funniest things is I remember walking by one of the Star Wars studios, and they were working on the different spacecraft. I was surprised to see these monsters taking Revell models, airplane models, and breaking them apart and then gluing them into place to build these spaceships. I was going, oh my God. I was just so surprised because I thought, they did all that stuff from scratch, because I was always impressed by the detail within those spaceships. And they were just breaking up, they were also building a lot of stuff themselves, but a lot of the little detailed parts, they were just breaking up old airplane models or ship models or whatever they could get their hands on and gluing the parts into place.
Wow. That's interesting. I'm sorry, what, Mike?
I was going to say, now we got that fancy thing going on there.
Yeah, so I was going to pull up Scott's. That's exactly what I was going to do.
Here we go.
I want to ask about Dark Crystal. How did they come up with the design of the Dark Crystal? I've been watching The World of the Dark Crystal on DVD, and they didn't discuss it.
Actually, I'm sure it was just based on sketches that Brian did. It was, I have to, the amazing thing about Brian Froud is that drawings came out of the end of his fingers faster than any human being I have ever worked with. I mean, he would just sit with a pad and pencil, and things would just flow out of his fingers. And it was like one continuous flow. It's like he would do 5 mystic heads on one page, then take one that he really liked, and then flip the page and do that, until it was finished. And then he would hand it off to me and say, okay, I want you to make it look like this. And the same thing with the Skeksis. So if you look at a lot of the pre-production drawings, which I guess Mike is flipping through right now.
When you find, hold on, Mike, I'll give you the screen so you could. No strings attached.
Flipping through the book here because I'm actually looking for you and seeing if you're in any of these pictures in here, Tim. But yeah, this is a book note attached. But I'm just as we're sitting here talking about Dark Crystal, I'm just looking at. I mean, obviously, the images, but again, more of Brian Froud's artwork as we go.
Yeah,
that stuff's beautiful.
And obviously, some of the stuff.
Like the one at the top is a finished drawing, and just like I said, the lower one is a series of different mystic heads, and actually, I don't know that any one of those on that page was actually used.
Mm-hmm. From these mystic heads here, right?
Zoom in, bring it a little closer. It's a little harder to see.
It's a little blurry now, but
yeah.
Yeah, Mike, I'm really sorry. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Mike, if you got headphones, it'll help you out better.
All right, I will have them for the next time.
Okay. Scott says, let's see, what does he say here? I've seen many designs. They even have the history special effect of the Dark Crystal book. Let me ask you, Scott, just out of curiosity.
Sorry, I'm not getting anything on this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because you're a little choppy.
My phone or what?
Yeah.
Better now?
So, you are still a little choppy.
Yeah, it's all broken up.
Oh.
Okay. So,
some technical difficulties, folks.
Yep. Hold on one second.
Oh well.
It's okay. It's still working. Let me ask you though. How's your phone's power? Is it charging?
Yeah. I can't tell. It's not telling me. I guess it. Anyway, so what else? So Dark Crystal, Fraggle Rock. Then
let's
after towards the end of production of Fraggle Rock, I had asked Jim if he wanted to started toy design and development section at Muppets, because I said we're doing things that are really different and fascinating, which would translate into toys really well, and the toy companies are not doing anything like what we are doing. And so he said to me, Tim, it's a wonderful idea. I just don't want to do it. And I think part of the reason is that Jim really wanted to just be a creative person. He didn't be managing this enormous business. He didn't have aspirations to be another Disney.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go off and do theme parks and have multiple movies going on, simultaneously. He just wanted to do his own creative projects, and he started to realize that he had, a shop in London, he had the shop in New York, he had the shop had started up in Los Angeles, and I think he just kind of got overwhelmed responsibility of trying to, manage that. And he had been hiring people to manage the business so that he could step away and be creative. But I think, it's difficult for people to break away from the idea of Jim running things. So after I got put on freelance, that's when I started designing and developing toy products myself. And the only company that would see me was Hasbro, because I had worked on them with them for doing the Dark Crystal figures. I tried to show concepts and ideas to different companies, and it didn't go anywhere. So that's how I ended up hooking up with Seven Towns, because I saw an ad in a trade magazine that they represented toy designers. And I went into their New York office because they're based in London.
Mm.
And, just even getting an interview with them was difficult. It wasn't until I told them that I had worked at Muppets for the last 5 years that they said, okay, fine, come in. So, and Maureen and I both were showing him, Larry, different concepts and ideas. And, he'd say, no, I don't see anything in that. No, I don't see that. And the fly hand puppet was really the first thing that sparked. And then within, I guess, next year, we were working on Boglins, and it was shown to Coleco first, and they wanted to add it as a kind of evil nemesis to the Sectaurs.
Okay.
And but at the same time, the economic issues were rearing its ugly head at Coleco, and they decided to drop Sectaurs. So we got the rights to Boglins was returned to us, and it was shown to Mattel. Soon, Larry Mass showed it to Mattel after that, and Mattel picked up on it, right away.
Oh, wow.
So then Boglins came out, and it was in the New York. It was in the U.S. for 2 years, and then Mattel decided they didn't want to continue with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Seven Towns took it to Ideal Lothair's in the UK. Mm-hmm. UK French toy company, and they ran with it. And so the biggest fans of Boglins are throughout Europe and Australia, Canada, Japan, much more so than it was ever in the U.S. And recently, I just got an order from Iceland and from Israel. So, the Boglins is, immense in Europe, and a lot of my orders are fulfilled to European countries, more so probably than the U.S.
So it's really Boglins around the world then.
Yeah.
Hold on, we're getting a little.
Sorry.
No, we're getting a little more choppiness from you. Just give it a second. Let's see if you can catch up.
So right. Feed that we're having tonight.
Yeah, we're having a little slow.
I think you're frozen, Tim.
Yeah. I hear the sound a little bit, but your picture is frozen.
Sorry about this, folks. We're trying to take this right now.
I'm going to let me remove him real quick and bring him back in. See if that does anything.
Okay. Yeah, we see all your questions, and we are definitely to get to them.
Nope, that didn't do anything.
Okay. Yeah. So Kevin, Scott, Anthony, Peter, we have your questions on board here. We're just right now having a little technical issues with Tim connecting. So as soon as we get this taken care of, we will pull it back up.
Mm-hmm.
Worst case scenario, we can always have Tim come back with us.
Yeah,
too.
I think he logged off. I think he's going to try to log back in.
All right, so let's just give him a second now. But yeah. So please keep sending your questions. I mean, we've had a really good conversation tonight about Dark Crystal, Fraggle Rock, and I mean, now we're really getting into this Boglin conversation.
Yeah.
So as soon as we get Tim back, we will be back with that live. Sorry again, folks, for the technical difficulties. Is he logging back in there, Ross?
He hasn't appeared yet, so.
But yeah, so if we lost Tim tonight, we will definitely
we'll bring him back, definitely.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again. Again, our apologies for it. I mean, certainly we have plenty that we can talk about with Tim. I'm logging on here and seeing if I can connect with him.
Yes.
And see if
I figured you already were. So.
Yeah. So give me 1 second. Let me just shoot him a quick message. I apologize.
Okay.
This is
Scott, let me ask you a question. Because you mentioned the book. Do you have the complete visual history of the Dark Crystal, which was written by our friend
Cassine Gaines?
Yes. Hold on. Let's see. I'm going to try to bring him back.
Is he back?
I don't know. Let's see.
I switched to my desktop.
Okay. Well, we don't see a picture of you now.
Okay. Hold on a second.
Sure thing.
All right. Good. Questions coming in.
Yes.
I don't know why that's not coming in.
All right. Thank you guys for hanging out with us still. We appreciate it. Spread the word. More cool guests coming. And that's actually good while we're waiting for Tim to rejoin us. Grazia was just talking about our friend Cassine Gaines, who Tim also knows because Tim worked with him on that book about the history of the Dark Crystal by Cassine Gaines and Cheryl Henson. So
now let's see.
Yes,
what's coming on?
So technology.
It's like your camera's not working right now.
Yeah, I know.
Did you when you logged in? Did you give your camera access?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
I guess we could still ask a couple of questions.
Yeah, we can ask you questions. So
a couple of questions for tonight. And then there's the little icon just came up. So maybe.
Yeah, I know. Why isn't it?
That's weird.
I don't know. As long as you gave it permission, it should be showing up.
All right. Well, we'll keep playing with that.
Oh, I tell you.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right.
So we had Peter Severi. He wanted to ask, and you were talking a little bit about this as you were trying to go around and sell Boglins and Sectaurs and stuff like that. He's moving to New York, and he's a character designer. He wants to know if you have any advice in finding agents or how to reach more clients.
In the toy industry?
Toy industry, character design, commercial campaigns. So I guess anything in the world of design like that.
Well, my recommendation is to go into doing computer graphics, computer animation, computer, character design and development, because physical stuff is getting to be less and less. Toys are all being designed on computer in either SolidWorks or any one of the 3D programs. Mm-hmm. The use of puppets, has been on the decline for many, many years. There's way too many ex-Muppet people in the New York tri-state area who are doing, puppet building, and, they're all competing for the same work, which, I would not, and when it comes to toy design, it's very difficult to get into the toy industry. The biggest development or change is the toy, so-called the designer toy industry, which, like 5 Points Festival or any one of those, toy shows. You're better off kind of starting there. And I know there are toy agents now who are going to, like Five Points Festival and other Designer Con in California would be the other big one. That's where you're going to have the most access. But these days, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you take, for example, Feisty Pets.
Okay.
Pets was developed by a toy designer. He did a series of YouTube videos, and then he hired kids to do, to open boxes and talk about the toy product online in YouTube. And he then started producing them in China himself. And it became an enormous hit. Granted, he had the money to do it, but Kickstarter campaigns have funded a lot of toy products. Some of them have been taken on, but I know, a major toy company approached the guy who did Feisty Pets and said, "Okay, it's a success now. We want to license it and do it." And he said to them, "Why? Why do I need you? Why should I get 15% royalty when I'm getting 100%? I don't need you guys anymore." And this is kind of a bit of fear into toy companies, the major toy companies, because these days you don't need to, be a big monster company. You can be your own little company, and through Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all these other things, be designing and creating characters and developing them, and use Kickstarter to fund it. Once you build an audience, and do it yourself. Be your own toy company. That's what I've been doing with Boglins for the last 3 years.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Boglins, and I know also, I guess, Sectaurs are returning too, correct?
Yeah, well, Zika got the license to do the 4-inch figures. We're going to be publishing a new comic book series, taking Sectaurs into the future. It's a really, I think it's a really great, story concept of, and very much reflects on the world we're dealing with now. Mm-hmm. And we've had 2 different comic book companies approach us about producing it.
Okay.
So we're negotiating with them now to see which one we think would be better for the property.
Okay. Who do you have doing the art and the stories for the comic?
We have some preliminary designs, but I don't think anyone. There's probably 2 artists that have been we're focusing on having them do stuff. I would like Joe Delabato, who did a lot of the original Sector stuff, to do some covers for us once we get it up and going.
Cool.
And we may also fund part of that through Kickstarter.
Nice.
That's great. I'd love to see Joe doing something. He did a lot of the licensed comics back in the 80s. I think he drew. Yeah. He did a lot, like for Marvel. I think it was like they had the Star comic line. And he did a lot of that stuff. Yeah, and he did a lot of work on the original Sectaurs comic books with Marvel. And I met him down in New Jersey. I think it was 2 years ago for the first time. And it's funny, that here we had this kind of history together, but had never met. And it was great. It was great to meet him. And he had a bunch of Sectaurs artwork there that he had done a long time ago. It was awesome. Yeah, no, he's a nice guy. I've met him a few times. We've done shows together. He's Jersey based, I believe.
Yes.
Now, Anthony wanted to know, with the new Sectaurs, are they going to have the puppets this time around, or are they figuring something different?
We're hoping to, but the cost of doing the puppets versus doing action figures is, it's much higher. Zika would need to pull in a lot of money through a Kickstarter campaign to fund those, whereas most companies are already set up to doing action figures. You know, there's a ton of common jointing system, and you know, there's a history behind them. To do the puppets is a totally different ball game, and may not even be accomplished by the same manufacturer. So that's a much more difficult thing to produce.
Gotcha.
Especially for a small company. I mean, it's one thing if you're a big major company, you can command a factory in China because of the amount of product you're producing. When you're just doing small runs, it's very difficult to maintain influence over that company to do, you know, a few thousand pieces rather than, you know, 50,000 or 100,000 pieces. You know, if they get somebody to come in with a larger order, they're going to drop your project, like, you know, very quickly and move on to something else.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't know if Tim. Okay, you just asked Anthony's question. I was just reading some of the questions. But part one was: is there anything else in the works that you can tell us about, Tim?
Well, I'm working on a new line of Boglins that I'm really excited about, because I'm part of the whole concept of Boglins is that they're irreverent and they kind of spoof or make fun of, you know, what human beings are centered around. And Maureen has come up with a great idea that I'm going to incorporate into this new line of Boglins, and it's going to be a different concept as far as packaging. And I'm in the process of molding him now. I've been showing on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Tim Clarke Toys, and I've been showing the development of that new character. But I think we've got some really, really cool, you know, a new approach to, you know, Boglins and a new tribe that I'm going to be working on. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also working on a tiki mug from Mondo.
Okay.
Based on my totems designs, and I'm in the middle of sculpting that while I'm working on the Boglins and working on storylines with Maureen on Sectaurs for the comic book series. So I'm a busy guy.
Are you thinking about doing a Boglins comic book as well at some point, or?
Yes, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think what I would really like to do is kind of like a field guide, kind of doing like a, you know, how they have field guides for naturalists, for birds, and, you know, for insects and all those things. I would like to do a field guide, but kind of like a spoof field guide of what the Boglins, where they came from, all the different tribes, because I mean, the U.S. is not familiar. I mean, there were over 100 mini Boglin characters created in Europe, and it's a totally untapped market in the U.S. So it would be great to do to explore all the different tribes plus the new ones that, you know, I'll be creating through the course of this year. And I was hoping to, you know, have the first one ready to show at 5 Points the end of May, but that show just got canceled. Unfortunately, all these shows are getting canceled. So all the new development I'm going to be doing is going to have to be through, you know, doing these podcasts and video chats and everything else. So
yeah. I just went on the I'm sorry, let me just say, I just went on your Instagram. I wanted to make sure I was following you, but I saw that you have some videos up. I wasn't going to play them right now because of sound, but I see the design that you're talking about for the new Boglin.
Yeah, and I started showing the process of actually making a Boglin, because a lot of people have been asking me, well, how do you actually approach, you know, sculpting and making the molds and doing all that stuff? So I'm breaking it down the process and showing it step by step each day as I'm working on them.
That's pretty cool. I mean, certainly, I think because you do this all out of your home, correct?
Yeah, my studio that I'm sitting in right now.
So maybe we can. What we can maybe do, obviously not tonight since we're having video thing. Maybe we can one night come back and you can maybe take us through your studio and show us the birth of a boglin.
Then I'd actually have to clean it up and that.
Oh,
No, it's okay. I've actually spent time working in studios many a times, both drawing, puppetry, all this stuff. So I'm accustomed to molds being on the floor.
I'm gonna try. Is there a way we can share screen and show? Because some people want to see the Instagram feed. Can we do that on this, Grazia?
I can't do that.
I have a share.
Unfortunately, right now. I can share a screen, but I'd have to load up. I'd have to load it up. Give me a second.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna try and pull that up just so people can take a look at your links here, because I'm on it now and there's all your cool boglins, and that's awesome that there are over 100 different boglins too. That's incredible. I remember seeing these when I was a kid. And,
yeah, great.
Let me do this here. You know what I'm gonna do? Give me 1 second. I'm gonna put this link over up on. I gotta plug in my Synthi.
We're learning all kinds of new things on IncrediChat. But yeah, no. So you mentioned obviously, it's gonna be interesting to see. You were talking about the conventions, and that's part of the things. That's what inspired us to do our IncrediChat, anyways.
Yeah.
All these conventions are now on hold, so you know.
And I unfortunately I think it's going to be. From what I read in the news recently, Johnson & Johnson has a vaccine which they say they will not start human testing until September.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't expect the vaccine to be ready till January of next year. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to be stuck like this for quite some time to come, and I wonder how much longer people's patience is going to hold out.
Do I have to log in?
Yeah, I can see.
Let's see here. Okay, guys, can you see the screen now? I'm gonna remove us from the feed and just use the screen so it's bigger. And here is this stuff. Don't worry about the login thing you see at the bottom. I'm not gonna log in right now.
So that's the newest of the boglins.
Okay. Let me see if I can play one of the videos. Oh wait, no, it tells me I need to log in to see the videos. I just don't want to. Let me see if I can continue here. This is Michael Gracia. Not now.
Oh.
And now I'm in here. I got to go back into my feed. Oops. Tim Clarke Toys. And let's see. I'm going to mute our mics for a second, just so everyone but mine, because I need my speaker. I'm going to mute us and see about playing the video.
I don't think there's sound.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys heard that. Mike, I'll put your... I didn't mute your mic? I muted Tim's. Okay, I heard sound. Maybe that's because it's coming off my headsets here. But what Tim was talking about in the video in this image is the little notches that he was making in here. I guess that is part of his mold making process.
Yep, those are the keys. So that the mold, when you close it, lines up exactly in the same place each time.
Okay, and let me just ask you a question, because I've done some puppet building. I've sculpted. I have a ventriloquist dummy in my closet I never finished, but I made the mechanisms and stuff for.
Sounds terrifying.
What?
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty cool one. It's a Frankenstein head monster. When I sculpted my puppet, I built that in. Do you put This looks a little different. I did a plaster mold.
Yeah.
And so I had like copper pieces to help separate the. Is that what these? But I built notches in as well. These notches here, what you call the keys, are these? Are you going to have something in there to help separate the mold, or like the copper pieces?
Well, when you're working with silicone, the only thing that silicone sticks to is silicone.
Okay.
So,
all right. I didn't know the material you were using.
So when you're making a silicone rubber mold, you have to use a parting agent, which is usually like a spray wax, so that the two parts don't stick together.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's just cool to see all that stuff happening. You know, like I said, the birth of a Boglin.
I know it's amazing to have.
What it is. and I have a bunch of videos on Instagram of some of the other Boglins that I've done, and I show there's video shorts of me opening the mold and pulling them out and all that. Those are some of the new mini Boglins. Those were the mini Boglin zombies. That was a new tribe that I did last year. 2 years ago, I guess. I started those 2 years ago. The two the newest. Those were sculpted by Maureen.
Okay.
And what
Here's
else?
a nice sectar.
Yep, that's one of the new ones.
Okay.
I've seen these sectars in person too. The new ones, they're really cool. This
No, they came out really beautifully.
Yeah.
And there's another. The blue one is the mini Boglin. That was done in England. But that was sculpted. I think that one was sculpted. I can't remember if that one was sculpted by me or Maureen. We kind of worked on them back and forth between the two of us. So all the early mini Boglins were sculpted by us.
Okay, here's like the shot I used of you. I cropped out a lot of this, but this is just beautiful. I love this photo of you.
Yeah,
with
that's
all your stuff behind.
30 years of building puppets and toy characters, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And here, just getting back to.
That's the dying mystic.
Everybody, and I guess we both are seeing this too. We're getting a lot of positive feedback. People are really liking hearing about the process behind making the molds and just seeing the process of the toys as well.
Great.
So
yeah, we'll definitely have to have you come back and maybe show your studio and how things are working, because this stuff's amazing. I mean,
those are
I'm just
that's from
this picture.
Yeah, that's one of the new drawings Brian did for the new Age of Resistance series of Dark Crystal, and before that are shots of all of us at
right here
on Junction.
There's that group shot.
This one you're talking about?
Yeah. That's all the people that showed up at that show in London, and it's the original designers, builders, and performers, plus some of the new people that have worked on Age of Resistance. And it was just an incredible weekend, just absolutely amazing, because a lot of the people, that I worked with on Dark Crystal, I haven't seen since the last day of shooting. We didn't have a way of staying connected the way you do now. So it's wonderful to now make a connection with them on Facebook and be able to, talk to them and see them. And Brian and I ended up sitting next to each other. And Wendy kept saying, "Brian, you have to sign autographs. Stop talking to Tim," because I haven't seen him in. Well, Brian, the last time I saw him, I think, was in New York when they did a special showing at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. That is, I can't remember this. I think that's Mike, who was Agra. for the walk around. Mike Edmonds, who was the walk around for Augur and the original Dark Crystal.
All right. Just looking around this time, you got some
cool little bit of Henson and Brian and Froud family trivia for a lot of people who did not know this, because obviously the Frouds also did the designs for the characters.
That's Wendy and Brian, and then I'm off to the left.
There you are.
okay. Yep.
Yeah. So Toby, the little baby in Labyrinth, is the child of the Frouds, and now Toby does his own design work his own design.
Yeah, he oversaw the production of the new Age of Resistance. That's the new werewolf Boglin, which I just did recently.
Oh, right up here. This is nice.
Yeah,
I like that.
that was suggested by one of the fans. You know, I had asked people what they wanted to see, and this young kid said, "I really want to see a werewolf Boglin." I said, "Oh, you know, that's a really great idea." So I knocked him out, and that was so well received. I just started making a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Are these this your art down here? Your sketches for Boglins?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, I'm working on doing. You know, probably towards Halloween, I'll do Frankenstein Boglin and Vampire Boglin, which is the other one. The other one next to it.
Yeah, right there.
And I want to play off more like the original Nosferatu,
Gotcha.
rather than the Bela Lugosi looking vampire. Those are some minis.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
This one here.
And that's one of the minis. That's a vampire mini that was done, gosh, back in the early 90s.
Oh. That's nice. And these are the totems you were talking about?
Yeah, and that's the one above it is a sketch I did for a concept sketch for totems also.
Let me right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm playing around with doing some more stuff with totems also.
I like that. And is this just like half and then you flip it and you just put them together?
Yeah, well, it's not the full image. I couldn't get it to frame properly. It's very wide horizontal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I like that. This is amazing stuff.
Hey, and actually, that's Kermit Love holding Big Bird's body, and that's Carol Spinney.
That's on the set of the Muppet movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice.
I mean, yeah, we got up for. We definitely need to come back and, like, I guess maybe spend some time with. I mean, we talked a lot tonight about Dark Crystal and stuff like that, but I definitely think seeing what you want. They will.
The center, if you click on that one with the traveling mat toy.
Yes.
That'll show you those are the original Dark Crystal toys.
Oh, wow.
Off on the left, and the Gartham that I sculpted, and the original Landstrider. Those were done for Hasbro. They were never produced. And then the newer toys that were done by Funko.
Okay. That's really cool stuff. Man, I love all this work here. This is beautiful to look at for me. It's also very inspiring, you know, as an artist.
And that photo with Jim in the center of the Dark Crystal characters. Almost everything in that.
Oh, right here.
Yeah. The Mystic was sculpted by me. I think one of the slaves in there is sculpted by me. The Skeksis was puppeteered by Brian Meal and myself. I did all the cable controls for that character, the animatronic controls. I worked on the Landstrider. I did the mechanism that shot the stinger out of his head. And then the crystal bats, I carved and built all the wings. So I kind of love that photograph because each element of it is something that I worked on.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful stuff.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very beautiful stuff.
yeah. It was amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
It was very lucky, very, very lucky.
Movie history.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
And,
All
So,
right.
I mean,
that's an early toy I did of Kermit sitting on a cloud. That was designed by Jim Mahon, who was one of the art directors at Muppets, and that was done for, I think, Hamilton Gift. That was one of the early, and that's the original mold, which I found a few weeks ago.
Wow.
oh wow,
Sculpted.
That's awesome.
that's really cool that you have that.
Yeah, some of the things lasted. Some of them, the other ones, just have deteriorated terribly. But
Yeah.
that was with the early RTV silicone rubber.
Huh.
It's a lot more brittle than what you can buy now.
Very nice.
Wow. That is cool to see. Yeah. Nice. All right. Yeah. So I'd say, like I said, we definitely need to have you come back, Tim. So we can get the cameras on, but then talk more about the Sectaurs, talk more about the Boglins, and certainly the big thing that we're doing this too is to push, like you said, the conventions right now are at a standstill. So anything that we can do, to get people to support all the artists like yourselves, and pick up your materials, pick up your items, pick up your artwork, and the word.
All the stuff is being sold on my website. It's www.totims. It's spelled like my name, TIMS. And
Totims.com.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to, buy new Boglins, the new Sectaurs, any of that stuff. It's
Whoops, hold on, spelt it wrong. I don't know why.
TOTIMS.
Yeah, I know, but it's TOTIMS.com. I don't know. It took me some reason Amazon popped up too. So there you go.
There it is.
There they all are. So yeah, you can get those over on Tim's website, totims.com. And then certainly our fingers are crossed that this mess is cleared up somewhat. In October, we can have our next IncrediCon in the mall, which would be great. And I know Tim will be hopefully joining us for that, and you can buy all the Boglins you want there.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So yeah, no, it'd be good. So Tim, thank you again for joining us tonight.
Yes, it was great.
For supporting everything we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
my pleasure.
So thanks. We're gonna be signing off now. Everyone will be back on Friday night. All right.
Who's our guest Friday night?
Friday night, our guy, I believe he goes by George. It's spelled Jorge, but I believe he goes by George Medina, creator of Wonder Duck and one of the hosts of Catch Duck Craze podcast.
Excellent.
So we will talk to him Friday night at 8:30.
Very good. Awesome.
All right,
cool. So thank you once again, Tim, and we will talk soon.
Yep.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
You too.